Hi, welcome to Chat Communications Happenings and Trends. We have a very heavy episode today. We've got a lot of topics to cover, and we also have Esha that's going to join in on the discussion a little bit later on. But let's just go ahead and jump in. And before I do, I want to just welcome everybody who's here joining us today. And if you haven't already, just please subscribe to our channel and consider donating to our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. So I guess I'll just go ahead and jump in, having said all of that. And I'm going to start with some pretty depressing news. So today we found out that Ed Schultz, who was a former MSNBC political host and also was a current employee with Russia Today with his own program. He passed away today, and he was also a big proponent of Bernie Sanders. He ended up leaving MSNBC kind of over some controversies regarding the Clinton and Sanders, I guess, primary, or campaigns and things like that. He felt that it was that the station or the network was too heavily leaning towards Clinton, whereas he had done a segment specifically to announce Bernie Sanders' campaign to run in the primaries, and they basically held off on that story to do some other story that had already actually been well known and well covered. It was a story that did need to still stay relevant because it was, if I recall, it had to do with either an unarmed shooting of a black man or a hurricane or something along those lines. It was or flooding in Houston, right? But I think that it was still a relevant topic. But again, that had been covered in the media quite thoroughly, and I guess very widespread, that they definitely did have an obligation to do the Ed Schultz segment on Bernie Sanders' announcement, and they definitely delayed that. So we just wanted to pay respects for him. Unfortunately, if you go into social media especially, you will see kind of very disparaging remarks about him being kind of a Russian troll or a Russian operative or anything along those lines. And just remember that those people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And regardless of what you think about Russia Today, that was not his primary career. That was not his that's not even, I mean, again, he worked for MSNBC as a political commentator and had his own show there. And so he was very well informed. He always advocated for working Americans. He always advocated for trade deals that didn't just favor corporate America or the corporations, just global corporations. He continually, spoke against those things, advocated that, we do have a wealth inequality that's growing increasingly by the day. And so I just wanted to mention that, here at Actify, that we do feel the loss, and he will obviously be missed by us. And just to not give those people on social media that are actually happy that he died for some reason, because again, they don't know what they're talking about, just don't give them any credence at all. Like, they're not worth it. Alrighty, so moving on. So in a little bit better news, we could go on and find out that Scott Pruitt has resigned from the EPA. So if you don't know who Scott Pruitt is, he used to be head of the EPA as of yesterday, and he had been getting a lot of slack lately. A lot of I guess people have been confronting him too, and we have a video we'll show you in a second about his corruption or seemingly corrupt activities he was doing. There were accusations of having people in his circle help kind of scrub his calendar so that meetings that he was taking were not tracked, even though that's against the law, and the public has a right to know what your officials are doing and what type of business they're conducting. He was very pro coal, pro oil, just any of those really dirty fossil fuels. He was all about them. He was a avid climate change denier. And so, I mean, this is a welcome sight. And part of the reason why he may have resigned, and in fact, this is one of the reasons he did provide, was that he was getting harassed by the public. And so we have a video about this type of harassment. Again, this is kind of a video that's going to display that we in no way have to be nice to these people. We don't have to be quote unquote civil to these people, because what they consider civility is just don't talk to them, don't approach them. Well, I think that this woman will show you a great way of approaching one of these officials without yelling at them. Take a look. Maybe.
I'm sorry, man.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Was I supposed to set that up? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it started playing on my end, and then I didn't screen share. So, hold on 1 second, guys. Sorry, I'm just learning this. Hold on. All right. Stupid thing won't play because it's hiding in the
Hi, I just wanted to urge to resign because of what you're doing to the environment in our country. This is my son. He loves animals. He loves clean air. He loves clean water. Meanwhile, you're slashing strong fuel standards for cars and trucks for the benefits of big corporations. You've been paying about $50 a night to stay in a DC condo that's connected to an energy lobbying pattern while approving their dirty sands pipeline. We deserve to have somebody at the EPA who actually does protect our environment, somebody who believes in climate change and takes it seriously for the benefit of all of us, including our children. So I would urge you to resign before your scandals push you out.
You guys all set?
Yeah. And so this video, I guess I've seen a lot of debate on whether he resigned specifically for this purpose or because of this woman that did confront him. Now, mind you, that these people are used to not being confronted at all about any of the things that they do. So even if it's as mild as this woman did, she just said, she literally said, I urge you to resign, as calmly and as nicely as possible. Well, that is intimidating to these folks because they, again, are not used to being confronted. They are not used to being told that their policies are actually hurting, that people are seeing that they are acting in a corrupt manner. They're just not used to it. They have people around them. They surround themselves intentionally so with people that are there to flatter them, that are there to brown nose them. They're sycophants. And so I think that at any time, if anybody gets an opportunity to confront one of these officials, by all means do so. And I can't imagine a more civil way to have done so than what this woman did. Now, you do see some people commenting, at least people that are very pro-Trump, about how, this was very uncivilized and very aggressive and just, you know what, they're just bitches and they're just whining and complaining about nothing because, again, that was such a civil way in which she just interrupted his dinner and, telling that these people are being noticed. And I think that that's particularly important, especially in this day and age, because, again, they're not used to this at all, which I think is why you see people that are MAGA people, because they themselves may not be used to being confronted by anything that they do. And I just think that this is a wonderful type of activism that you can do if you are given the opportunity to do so. Now, specifically, was it her that kind of pushed him over the edge to resign? I don't know, but that was his justification for the resignation, was that he was getting harassed, which, of course, that is a form of harassment to them, is just being talked to and told to resign. So I think that this is a step in a positive direction. Now, I have to kind of rain on everybody's parade a little bit, because the person that's currently going to replace him is no friend to the EPA. In fact, his name is Andrew Wheeler, and was kind of slightly confirmed, and he's going to be acting EPA administrator. And he is a lobbyist or was a former lobbyist for the coal industry. So you can, and again, an avid climate change denier. So you can kind of see exactly that this administration is no friend to any type of climate action at all. In fact, I think the majority of them, if not all of them, believe that this is not true, or at least they're paid to believe that. And I think that they are very destructive to our planet and to the country as a whole. And anytime that you get to encounter anybody, you can tell them that they're destructive, because it's true. Unfortunately, he's not being replaced by that's going to be, oh, well, make sure we have regulations in place so you're not poisoned by your water or anything along those lines. It's a sad state of affairs when you just pretty much have a shitty person that replaces a shitty person. That's what it comes down to. Alrighty, and I think we have, are we ready to move on to the Emmanuel Macron story, or
I did want to,
I wanted a discussion about this.
I wanted to just add in a few things about the whole thing about the harassment thing. The thing that drives me crazy about that is these are, granted, he's not an elected official, but he was assigned by our elected officials to act in this way, and they are, they're part of the government, and we have the right to tell them what we feel is wrong, or that they're doing their job wrong, because it does affect us, and it does affect all Americans, and we should be more vocal to them. And for so long they not had to worry. This whole thing about civility is just wrong. We don't need to be civil to these people. We don't. I mean, she did it civilly, but we don't even need to do that, because you know what? They brought us to this point. They really did. So that's all I wanted to say on that one.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. They didn't earn it. They didn't earn that, my civility. They didn't earn that. Now, if that's something that you want to give them because that's just who you are, by all means do that. But you are not obligated to do that either. As long as you don't, advocate for violence or advocate for, anything violent. I would stay away from that. But outside of that, I think it's an open game. I think you can tell them what's on your mind, and you can yell at them, because again, that's the freedom of speech issue, and it's not violent behavior. It's not like you're punching them in the face, and if they can't handle it, that's on them. But completely. All right, Asha, we're gonna get to you in a second, but do you mind muting your microphone, please? Okay. All right, so Janet, if you can go ahead and kind of get ready to display that tweet, and then I'm going to pull Esha into the conversation, so that once I explain, kind of get the setup, then she can help break it down and kind of dispense her wisdom about this. Okay.
Okay.
So yesterday, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, tweeted out a tweet, obviously, about colonialism. And it is as follows. I can't see it, unfortunately.
Laura needs to jump over to it.
Okay. Oops, I just saw it, and now it's gone.
Lauren, you need to make it my screen step.
Oops, it's gone again. Okay, so can I not talk with it being on screen?
No, Lauren should know how to.
I'm on it.
It keeps going away.
Oh, so maybe you're not seeing it because you're talking, so it's jumping your screen. Do you want me to read it? It's 60% of Nigerian population is under the age of 25. That's 60% of the population which, like me, did not witness colonialization. We are the new generation. We are going to dispel prejudice by rebuilding a new future through culture. And then it's just in French underneath the same thing.
So I think that this is an incredibly naive perspective, if we can call it naive. And so now I'd like to get Esha's perspective on this, because I think she has a lot to say. So Esha, I'm going to turn it over to you. You saw the tweet yesterday and you had a lot to say about it. So can you explain to our audience exactly, kind of break it down, and then kind of explain maybe why his perspective is a little bit incorrect?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, this is not, well, let's start with just Emmanuel Macron and how he became elected to power. About a year and a half ago, he was running with this independent party called En Marche. And basically, he got a lot of support from the Democratic establishment, saying he's the new hope for France, and that he is good for the economy and good for Europe. And they contrasted it with Marie Le Pen, who he was running against, who was actually a Nazi. Like, her dad was Vichy in the Nazi France. So when that happened, a lot of centrists jumped on board and used Macron as an example to show why centrism works. But then, since then, he has been showing himself more to be a much farther right figure than what the U.S. establishment media has portrayed. And sadly, he's been very blind to the effects of colonialism on Africa and Asia. I mean, about last year, somebody asked him a very reasonable question on whether or not there should be a Marshall Plan for Africa. And his response is, Africa's problem is civilizational and people are having too many babies. And again,
I think. Hello? Okay, I think we just lost you for a second, but yes, his response about that it's more of Africa's issue. They're having too many babies. Is a very right wing perspective. That's what you hear in basically this racist right wing America. You hear that about current African Americans at home, and you hear that about Africans abroad in Africa. So that's completely an accurate assessment, I think, about kind of his views on the situation. So why don't you continue?
Can you hear me now? Okay. So now it's for me and this continues on, and he made this comment in Nigeria about how most of them have never witnessed colonialism, but it seems like he ignores, he's the president of France, and he should know about the treaties in which France has entrapped colonial Africa in, and their monetary policies. So France is what's actually one of the worst post-colonial empires in modern history. So what happened was that during World War II, a lot of their army was in shambles, and they needed the people from Africa and Asia to come and serve in their armies to beat Hitler. The British also recruited people because there weren't enough manpower to do that. So then, when they need people from the historically exploited world, basically, then a lot of these colonies decided, hey, we're helping France out more than they are. We want our independence. And France basically had a lot of former colonies like post-independence, and what it did was it played upon, like, at the same time, we have to remember in America, they were like really afraid of a Bolshevik revolution happening in Africa and losing its control. So, so basically what France did, for lack of a better word, is basically they renounced colonialism in name only, while forcing these colonies who obviously don't have equal bargaining power against France. And remember, this is after NATO. So if like any of these colonies attack France, then the whole NATO machinery can rain down upon them. And some of these countries are like Gabon and Ecuador and Guinea, which have like populations of like 4 million, very tiny countries. And so basically, France forced them to sign this treaty called the System of Compulsory Solidarity. So there are 14 countries that are members of the CFA zone, and they're all in West Africa. And basically, the first level of colonization is at the monetary level. So the treaty forces these 14 African states to put 65% of their foreign currency reserves into the French treasury. And on top of that, they have to pay 20% of their currency every single year in taxes to repay France for their colonization. This is like basically making, imagine if like, I'm sorry to make this, if this is a crass analogy, but imagine if South Carolina made the slaves repay reparations to the slave owners for their freedom. Like, that's basically what this is.
Well, I just think that it's interesting that he not only, like in the specific tweet, he was basically saying that, well, that was another generation. I mean, you hear this a lot about African Americans in the States today about, well, you know, they're not really repressed. They're not a subjugated group of people. I didn't do that as a as a white human being. I'm not a white human being, but pretend I didn't do that. Like I didn't have slaves. It was my great grandparents that had slaves. So, I am absolved from any responsibility and of any of their issues that they face today, because it is systemic. Well, colonization is a systemic issue too, and it has shaped a lot of how they behave and what they do in their own culture. In fact, in many cases, colonization has resulted in an entire obliteration of people's culture. So I think that it's also interesting that he added the little blurb about culture. We're going to basically move on from colonization with the help of culture. Then I have to go back and ask, whose culture is he advocating for? Do you have an idea?
That to me sounds like a reverse. And on top of that, he added something about prejudices of the past. And basically, he is trying to say that Africans who are hostile to African leaders and African people who are suspicious and hostile of France have prejudices from the past, and not that. And he's completely ignoring that France is robbing them blind. Okay, so yeah,
been doing so for years.
Since they've actually not had independence. Let me just break it down. It actually gets worse. Okay, so now basically an African country only has not an African country. I'm so sorry. The 14 countries in the CFA zone only has access to 15% of its monetary reserve. That means that for every dollar, they can only access 15 cents of their own money. And according to the CFA, if they need to borrow more money in order to fund public works or infrastructure, guess what? they have to buy. They have to go to a French private equity market to borrow money at market rates. So basically, they have to borrow their own money with interest, according to this treaty, and like that they signed in the late 50s and 60s. And so, just the monetary policy shows you, hey, France has an extraordinary amount of control. Because, for example, let's say that one of the let's say Burkina Faso. This is not a hypothetical. Actually, this is real. Wants to nationalize their industries of like they're very rich in oils, minerals, everything. Like our iPhones cannot like function without these like special minerals that are available in this area. Well, if they want to get a loan, France can be like, where they, in order to nationalize these infrastructures, France can be like, nope, you need to use this French company, and you need to this from this private guy, and you need to use this American company, and so that the money can go to the Koch brothers. Like they have that control. But it gets worse, believe it or not. And inside this colonial pact, there is a demand that France has the right of first refusal for any natural resources found on that land. So let's say that France is giving 40 cents for gold per kilogram or per carat of gold that they're digging. Well, let's say that India wants to give like 60 cents. These countries cannot have India dig the gold for them. They have to give it to France at 40 cents. And only when France does not want it can they go to another country or another vendor in order to get their natural resources extracted. And of course, all of this in contract has to be paid in euros and in hard French currency. And okay, so at that point, you wonder.
So yeah, I can see that there's like a big nest of potential financial interests that obviously benefits France in both in the natural resources that are extracted from these countries, and also if they have to borrow money, because again, France is taking a lot of their money. They have to actually borrow from a private firm from France that gets a priority, and so it seems like they would stay indebted to France for an indefinite period of time. But I wanted to go back and specifically look at Macron's tweet about the culture issue, because I think that he mentioned that we can we'll get past this, whatever he meant by that, with the help of culture. And again, I wanted to get your idea of what culture he's kind of giving he's a proponent of. Like, is he saying that we're going to make sure and build up the culture that currently exists, or the culture that we helped obliterate in these areas, or are we going to basically assure that it's still French culture, Western culture? What's your what are your thoughts?
Well, since he thinks Africans have a civilizational problem, I'm pretty sure what he wants is basically basically an elite class of people who grew up in French boarding schools in France to basically be the rule makers in these 14 African states. It's definitely like indigenous rule and control. It would naturally mean that France can't continue to exploit these resources, and not like around 2005 or 7. Even President of France Chirac said, without Africa, France would be a third world country. So it basically to make this racial, white people in France have wonderful benefits. They have 30-hour work weeks. They have wonderful health care. They get retirement pension. And this is all being financed by literal children slave labor mines in Africa, and so he wants to see. It seems like he just wants to perpetuate this culture, because the minute any other culture comes in, it would mean a lower quality of life for people in France.
Now, would it necessarily mean that, or would it mean that they would just no longer have the type of control in these areas that they would normally have control over?
Probably, I would say it would mean that the wealthy in France will have to give up more in taxes and more in benefits in order to have a more egalitarian society if they were to give up control. So this is, again, like the 1% versus the 99% issue. And and it seems like the wealthy in France would rather not have to pay for their own infrastructure and use like their own capital for the French economy.
Just out of curiosity, how do you feel that this tweet was received in France? Do you happen to have an idea?
It depends. France has a strong left-wing culture, and a lot of people, like I said, after World War II, they needed a lot of African migrants to come for their labor, and they have a big immigrant culture. So he received quite a bit of backlash within France, and so. But again, like I said, in France, unfortunately, the right-wing movement is also strong, and it seems like as we know, that Marine Le Pen came in second, and there's a big, in many parts of France, there's a big perception that immigrants just come and take our benefits. I don't know if you remember, but the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, like a few years ago, basically made fun of these girls who were kidnapped from Boko Haram, saying, at least don't cut our benefits. And so he's not helping with that. He's actually making it worse, because he's perpetuating the lazy African who comes to France to get our social security, get our pension benefits, instead of like we robbed them blind in the past, and we made their countries really bad, and we have an obligation to and a lot of them like served in the French army in World War II, and in order to get French citizenship. So he's basically making the situation worse for the minorities in France, and also empowering the white nationalist, French nationalist wing.
Yeah, I think that's, you're going to see backlashes. I mean, that's kind of the world over right now. You're receiving backlashes to neoliberalism and neoliberalistic policies from all different stripes. So whether it's from immigrants and from traditionally marginalized communities to, working class white Westerners, you see this kind of this backlash because it's only benefited a certain class of people, and that is the people at the top. The world, I mean, regardless of where you are in the world, that's who it has benefited. And I'm assuming, once China kind of gets its own and comes into power, builds a middle class, because I think it's projected by about 2025 that the entire Chinese population will actually be a part of the middle class or higher. But if they go to more, not an equalized distribution, but more of what we have in the States, you're going to see another backlash just in China. I just think that, these neoliberal policies have failed. And I think people are realizing that now. The way that they go about blaming is a whole different ballgame, whether they blame these migrants or minorities for their ills, or, they blame the 1% that has rigged the system, so to speak. I think that's an interesting perspective that unfortunately right now it seems like that right-wing type of authoritarianism, type of blaming the people with the absolute least power seems to be the primary, at least the primary form that has been taken hold. But hopefully we'll see some left-wing populism before
you go, before like we open up for questions, I need to make 2 more comments about the treaty that is so egregious. Okay, so on top of that, did you like in these treaties, France is like the exclusive, it has the exclusive rights to sell weapons and to train the militaries in these 14 countries. So basically they and also France has like all these bases all over these like 14 countries, and they cooperate with the US, so like when they built the drone base in Cameroon and Mali and Niger. And what happens is that like when there's about 26 or 27 years ago in Burkina Faso, a very leftist man came to power. His name is Thomas Sankara, and he was talking about African solidarity and basically he was basically talking, he wasn't even that extreme, like they call him a Marxist, but if you listen to him, he sounds a lot like Corbyn. He wanted to rebuild the infrastructure. He wanted to make sure there was education for all, like rural schools and rural hospitals. And basically that also meant that he was going to nationalize all these resources. So France and US got together and basically bribed his right-hand man, I can't remember his name, and they overthrew him and killed him. Like, and so anytime these colonies try to have like any kind of indigenous movement or populist movement to even like lose the stronghold, the French military is right there to quell any rebellion. So it's not like calling these countries independent is a little deceiving.
It sounds like it. I want to read somebody's comment. So Alan Parker made a comment earlier on, kind of when we were just starting the discussion. He says that after World War I, Ho Chi Minh went to Paris when they were doing the Versailles peace treaty to talk to Woodrow Wilson about France to get out. But racist Wilson just ignored him. And it probably wasn't well, yeah, he's racist, but it wasn't necessarily because of racism that he ignored him. But again, because of who it benefited, right? It benefited his friends and things like that to stay in these countries and to make sure that there was some sort of leverage to hold over the populace, like, I don't know, taking all their money, for instance, and making them borrow money from from who they'd say. I think that's something to keep in mind for sure.
Well, let me make a quick comment about that. So what you guys have to remember is post-World War I, Germany had overseas colonies, and Woodrow Wilson like ran on the campaign of freeing these overseas colonies. But in order to, but according to the terms of the Versailles Treaty, he basically redistributed Germany's colonies in Africa to France and Britain, and had these colonial, these colonized countries basically repay back part of Germany's quote-unquote debt for starting World War I, which was like very heavy-handed, but also like that's kind of like what he did. It was very capitalistic, and and so that just like kind of, and eventually we realized that kind of paved the way for Hitler to rise, because Hitler wanted to reclaim the colonial past of Germany, right or wrong. So yeah, centuries, like this has been going on for at least 2 centuries.
You know, I wish that there was a better solution as far as to just end colonialism or end imperialism, because we know that this stuff just keeps going. You know, you saw the British Empire. Well, the British Empire isn't as as widespread as it used to be. In fact, they've, other countries have claimed their independence from them, or the British Empire have, I guess, given independence, like in the case of Hong Kong, back to China. But you still see traces of the British imperialism and American imperialism. It's like this whole Western imperialist mentality, or maybe it's just something that's just so common in like nation states to want to do, is just to own other property. I don't know. I just wish that it would stop. I mean, we don't have a right to anything as far as I'm concerned, and France doesn't either. And the damage that all of these imperialist states have done to, damaging these people's culture or their like financial independence, I think that they should be held accountable for that. They won't, unfortunately.
Wait, let me interrupt you right there. They can be held responsible, but it has to be from us. It has to be the citizens of France who hold Macron responsible. It has to be the citizens of America who say, we want you to stop fucking, sorry, am I allowed to use that word?
You're fine.
Okay, we want you to stop screwing up those countries. Because, like I said, these people, like the minute any left, slightly populist movement comes into effect, the U.S. military is right there with the drones, and the France military is right there to invade. So it has to be upon us, and we need to educate our countrymen to actually stand up to our own imperialism. So there is hope, but it is incumbent upon us.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, because they're not going to make those changes themselves. My only concern is that whenever you do see these left-wing movements, even if it's in the United States, it usually gets squashed. And I think that that's kind of what happened after the civil rights movement. You see this whole change in society that was for the better, but you didn't really see the progress continuing at that same rate. And because, people were assassinated, people, primary figures in that movement were assassinated. And it's just really hard to pick up a mantle from somebody that's so prominent too, to continue the message. And so my fear is that would be replicated again. And I hope that France wouldn't replicate that or continue that. I hope that they will stand up against that type of thought process, because it sounds like there was at least some backlash from the French people, at any rate, to at least the tweet that he submitted. As if, I mean, it was so stupid, guys. Like, how dumb do you have to be to believe that you are not responsible for the past of your people? You're the head of the state. You have to be held responsible. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody comes in behind Trump, they have to be, if it's somebody super progressive, which hoping, God willing, they need to make sure like they hold us responsible and hold the country responsible and them responsible for the damage that they may have done.
I agree, and to me, this is like more than like stupid. Like, it's equivalent to Trump not knowing what NAFTA is. So he's the bloody president, and he doesn't know what the terms and conditions of a prominent treaty is. And even Trump, as dumb as he is, knows what NAFTA is.
Absolutely. So we have a number you can call. It's 508-534-8585 if you want to be a part of today's conversation. We did talk about three topics, and so, but you're more than welcome to, I guess, come up with your own topic that you want to just talk to us about. Let's see. There was a comment I did want to read. Where was it? Oh, Philip Alban. Speaking of, he mentions you, Esha. He says, what Esha is describing is what also happened in Iran. Do you have any comments with that, or do you kind of agree with that perspective?
He is 100% right in that, but it was not by France, it was by the British. Iran in the 50s had this very progressive leader, Mossadegh, and he wanted to nationalize all the oil reserves. So the CIA went in and assassinated him and installed their puppet, the Shah, who basically enriched himself, but then but then sold out his country. And so yes, he is exactly right. That happened in Iran, but again, it was another European power doing the same thing, and American power.
Amanda, you're muted.
It always gets me. It's going to get me every single show at some point. I guarantee you. Obviously, it did. That's another drinking game you can try to do too. Is how many times I just start talking and no one can hear me because I'm muted. Would be another one. I was reading through the comments about something and then it was a little confusing, so I decided to not pursue that. Let's see. So Janet, what's your perspective on this? Do you think that this is this is what Esha is saying is true, or I guess you can look at facts to see how accurate it is, obviously, but do you think that, with Macron's statement specifically on kind of like, let's rehabilitate, let's try to build things up through culture, do you agree with Esha's perspective on that one?
I feel like, this has all come down. I know colonialism started way before real neoliberalism, but I think it continues under that, and they're not willing to give that up. And when they talk about culture, I'm 100% sure they're talking about, France's culture, the neoliberal Western, that culture. They're not talking about really helping them, retain their culture. That's not what they do. You know what I mean? Like that's just not.
Well, some of the culture can't even be retained. I hit myself in the face again.
Frank.
And some of that culture can't be retained because it's been so wiped out. Like there are whole tribe groups that don't exist in Africa anymore. For various reasons, but because of this imperialism that happened and the slave trade and all those things, some of those tribes are gone. And so you can't regain that. All you can hope to do is retain what you have left to some extent. Like in the United States, some Native American tribes were completely wiped out. And we can't go back and say, well, you know what, here, you guys can, retain that culture that's completely gone now, by the way, because that tribe doesn't exist. I think that's such a foolish perspective for him to have. Absolutely. But it is a perspective that does perpetuate neoliberalism and neoliberalistic policies for sure. Okay, so I'm curious, what propelled him? Was there something about yesterday that was particularly meaningful for France regarding colonialism or imperialism? What propelled him to tweet something as tone deaf yesterday? What do you think?
It was actually the Nigerian president, his meeting Buhari, and Buhari wanted Nigeria was a British colony, but it seems like Macron wanted some kind of economic partnership, and Buhari probably brought up hey, my people are very there's two things. There's the especially in Biafra, which is a majority Christian area, while the rest of Nigeria is majority Muslim, are very suspicious of you. So I think I know Buhari also represses the people in Biafra, so yeah. but it's definitely like his meeting with Buhari and other leaders of Nigeria, where they were insisting on talking about colonialism that made him prompt. It's kind of like Trump's meme tweets.
That makes sense then in the context. Do we have anybody that's wanting to call in at all, Janet?
No, I haven't gotten any calls yet.
Okay. Let's see. So in case you haven't heard, the number is 508-534-8585, and that's if you want to just talk to us about things. Alan, I don't know what you mean by that. It happens to everybody, Amanda.
Oh, when you hit your head.
Oh, when I hit my face on the microphone? Yes, I'm sure it does. You know what? Thank you. I'll believe that. I'll believe that. It makes me feel.
And we get to drink more. Not that I'm drinking.
Is it France? It's not France's Independence Day yesterday. That was American Independence Day.
Yeah.
14th of July is Bastille Day.
Yep.
So he's got a few more days to go until it's France Independence Day.
Well, just an interesting fact. He also last year once said how France needs a king.
Needs a what?
A king.
Yeah, Emmanuel.
Oh, a king?
Yes.
That's why Trump was like so enamored by him, because that's what Trump wants, you know? They had the whole parade and everything, and just it's
so weird, because I think it's very interesting to see that somebody that's held up as like this super neoliberal, you know, kind of would be more of on the Democrat end is very showing a lot of signs like Trump, right? And authoritarianism and like this ingrained nationalism and things like that. I think that neoliberalism policies have given rise to that type of thought process and that type of behavior and desire and magnitude towards it as well. What do you
like with Trump and Macron though, it's the same exact dynamic that George W. Bush and Tony Blair had. Like it's maybe he's maybe a little bit worse than Blair as far as like how willing he's willing to kiss Trump's ass.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, but it's really disturbing. It's quite depressing, for sure.
And these same establishment figures basically scorn Corbyn, who gives a good anti-imperialistic critique for the Brits and who talks about like equality worldwide as two extremists when like, and then they, for me, what disappointed me most about Obama is that he said well, technically other heads of state shouldn't be endorsing heads of states, but he endorsed Macron like a few days before the election. And he didn't do the same thing for Corbyn. In fact, Howard Dean told everyone to vote Liberal. And Liberal is the UK's centrist party, by the way, instead of Corbyn. So it just kind of, and one more thing is that all the Hillary Clinton election people went and worked for Theresa May, which shows you where their loyalties lie. And it's not with Labour.
Oh, absolutely. It's not with anything that is for the people at all. And I mean, it's just this, unfortunately, Jeremy Corbyn, he is in a prominent position, but he is really the lone voice out of the majority of the West. And that's probably insanely difficult to have to be and do, because he doesn't have anybody that's pretty much as prominent as he is globally, at any rate, to help balance these type of very like imperialistic, very militaristic type of people and what they advocate for and strongmen. And it's got to be a lonely job for him. And of course, he's demonized all the time in the process.
Hey, Amanda, can you read that the latest from Philip Albin, the question for Esha?
Oh, sure. Let me see. So Phil Albin says or asks, any ideas on how we get France to release African countries from servitude? Wasn't Tunisia and or Algeria able to gain a greater independence?
Tunisia, yes. Algeria, sadly, no. But Tunisia is in a unique position in that they have a lot of natural resources, and they've also had a lot, like they've had they just have a better land that they've settled on. And so, yeah, Tunisia has been able to be pretty successful. And actually, ironically, it is probably the only Arab Spring that was grassroots that America didn't try to quench, unlike the ones in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain that the US tried its hardest to quench. So, yes, Tunisia is a good model, but I don't know how countries like Guinea and Chad, who are just on the Sahara Desert, are going to be able to get themselves into that position to be like a Tunisia. It has to be external pressure, like international pressure. Like the US has a lot of leverage with France. And we just don't have to cooperate with them in Africa anymore, and they'll change. So it's harder. It's harder.
Hello?
Hello? I'm here.
Hi. No, I just want to talk to you about something I saw about Donald Trump, trying to hire 40 foreign workers as Margalatos or
can you
what
hold
a
on
hypocrite. This guy
for 1 second? Can we hold on for 1 second?
Hey, Mark, can you hold on?
Huh?
Mark, hold on for 1 minute because Amanda
I want to allow her to finish her thought, and then I don't know who's on the phone right now, and so I'll introduce you. So if you can just hold on for 1 second and let Esha finish her statement. All right, Esha, please continue.
Okay, like I said, Tunisia is just situated better geographically, and sadly, for all these African countries, Gaddafi was the one who was going to stand up to imperialism. He was the one who wanted to start the African Union and get rid of this, the whatever you call this mess, the petrodollar, petro-euro, whatever. But he's gone now, and it can't be an accident. So things are harder for these countries now.
All right, so who do we have on the phone with us?
It's Mark Anderson.
Okay, Mark. Hi.
Hey, Amanda. I saw this article about Donald Trump trying to hire 40 foreign workers as Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. I mean, what a hypocrite. First he goes after corporations who hire immigrants, and he does the same thing himself. He doesn't even hire American workers. And the fact that Trump supporters, still support this guy after all the evidence out there that he does the same thing is tough and disgusting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, the Trump administration hasn't really gone after corporations themselves that have hired or have illegally hired these workers, but instead they have gone after the workers, right? By doing roundups, by basically arresting the workers with little to no repercussions of the people who have done the hiring. But there are a few Trump supporters that have caught on to this, and I think there was a report about this last month in which people that relied on that type of visa to hire temporary work from abroad, basically for field work or for whatever, these Trump supporters basically did say that they felt like they had been lied to, and they feel dumb for having supported Donald Trump, because they need those workers and they had relied on them in the past and were needed those visas, and they have restricted the number of those type of visas. So this is for legal immigration, right? Or legal temporary immigration, specifically. So it's unfortunate, but not all Trump supporters did rely on that legal temporary immigration either. And they don't know about it. I think that there's something to say about keeping voters uninformed too. I think that there's a lot to say about that, and that there was also a report basically saying that Trump voters were the least educated out of all the voting blocks possible. So yeah, there's something about that, and so I think that kind of is why you still see large support for him, because they don't understand hypocrisy. They don't see it. What they see is Donald Trump, ramping up on immigration. What they see is him taking his administration kidnapping migrant and children that wanted to immigrate to the U.S. that needed to, because they were escaping violence. But they love that. They love that type of behavior. They think that it's a show of strength, as a show of like immorality, which is remarkable to me that they see that as any type of strength whatsoever. But yeah, I think you're right, Mark.
Like Republicans don't care about hypocrisy. Like the voters or the politicians, they don't care. They just pretend to care. It doesn't matter to them. Like you're not gonna get them on hypocrisy. They just don't care.
Absolutely. Or the way that they do care is if they're like, oh, but the but the left is being hypocritical about XYZ. That's how you can get them to care about hypocrisy. And then they suddenly know what that word means too. It's very fascinating. I feel like half the country's lost its mind. I just do. And the other half has lost his mind too. I feel like a lot of people have lost their mind because they both sides of these, these resistors or these Trumpists or MAGAs people, they don't see their own faults and their own hypocrisy that they kind of wallow in and love, but they point towards each other. And I feel like, you've got these, people that are outside of that go like, hey, you guys, both of you are hypocritical. Y'all are both bad about this. And then they're like, you made that person lose. Okay.
Can I make one quick comment about the immigration thing? We as a nation have also don't talk about our imperialism. I mean, in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan sponsored these death squads that gang raped nuns and executed priests, so-called the Party of Christian Values. And basically made those countries dangerous to live in, and that's why they need to flee. So it is our moral obligation to accept these asylum seekers because we made their countries so dangerous for them. And both the Democratic Party, the news media, and our education system is meant to cover up for the empire that it allows this kind of racist thought to breed.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt. In fact, I think that the education system is partly to blame because what the education system is doing or has done is more about compliance. It's more about making sure people don't talk out of turn, stay in line, learn the bare minimum about American history, but only in a very nationalistic perspective. And it's terrible. It's a brainwashing technique and unfortunately it's been very effective. It's been troublingly so effective. And I want to believe that education can help get us out of this type of stage of ignorance that I believe that we're in. We've been in it for years now, 40 plus years possibly. And that would take a lot of reforms, and it would need to start at not only campaign finance reform, but also reforming our education system and assure that we stop with this whole terrible narrative, with this positive narrative and this American history narrative that everything was lovely and we were always in the right. Because I think that has done such a disservice, and it has allowed us to be complicit in a lot of the activities that have gone abroad, like the several bombings. I think I saw a statistic today about the U.S. is engaged in 40 has occupied 40% of the world's countries, and not just occupied, but we're fighting them. We're bombing these places. That 40% of the countries out of the entire world. I mean, that is just grotesque. It's grotesque, and there's nothing to be proud of about that. Nothing to have any pride. But for some reason, like, you get neoliberals, you get neoconservatives, and they'll find a way to look at it positively. Well, we're spreading freedom. I'm sorry, bombing countries are not spreading freedom. In fact, it is assuring that those countries and those people that are living there, not only are they fucking dying, but they are going to hate us. Hate us. You are growing terrorism. We are, as a nation, we're doing this. It's appalling. It's appalling.
So, Mark, do you want to add anything else, or are you all set?
Well, I mean, I've learned more from you ladies and the progressives on Twitter about American history more than I ever learned in school in my whole entire years of being on this earth. I'm serious.
Well, thank you.
I mean, I want to say thank you, but I also want to say, like, how sad does that talk about our education system? You know, it's bad. And, and not to mention how education is already so devalued, right? That's why people are like this elitist, they get this like elitist perspective of, if you are educated, then you are somehow of the elite, which is not true by any means. A lot of professors don't even make more than $30,000 a year. I mean, that is such a myth, but unfortunately you have a devaluation of education, and then a whole compound that with the terribleness of the education system and actual understanding of what has happened and understanding facts. And it does end up growing a lot of distrust, unfortunately. And we need these institutions to not be as distrustful or as distrusted as they are. But it's completely understandable why they are.
All right, so Mark, you all set?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you for calling.
Okay.
All right, are you guys?
Yeah, you know what? It was a lot. We had a lot of topics to cover today. But if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. Please hit that bell. That will notify you when we go live or when we add another video. And also, please consider donating to our Patreon page. We do have the link in our description below. Any little bit amount that you can offer would greatly help us. It helps us improve our videos and our quality and try to get like the right setup. It also helps. The bigger that we can grow, the better. The more people we can have on the program, the more I guess kind of larger names we can also attract to our program too. And we do want to have large names on here live specifically, so that we can have our audience directly ask them questions, which I think would be phenomenal, but we can't do it without you guys' help. Is there anything else anybody wants to add? I do want to thank Esha for joining us today and explaining this situation. I did happen to see that tweet and I was quite disturbed by it, but I think she helped provide some kind of context, and Esha, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And mention what you wanted to mention, Esha.
Oh, okay. I don't know how familiar your audience are with IPM, the Institute of Progressive Memetics, but we started a new Twitter account called IPM_history, so that you can learn so that we can learn decolonized history. So be sure to follow that account. And well, for example, like we just need to be I think the more we talk about the true history, the better we are and the less racism we breed.
Oh, absolutely. And the more we can dismantle other people's arguments too. And we can say, look, this type of historical perspective is particularly biased in this way. But without understanding the full context or understanding another perspective, we won't be able to actually do that.
So, well, I mean, are we ready to wrap up, or?
Yeah, that was my point.
All right.
So thank you guys so much for joining us today. And we have an interview that's going to be available, at least half of it's going to be available tomorrow, right, Janet?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is it'll probably be available tomorrow. It was a fascinating interview, guys. I implore everybody to watch it. It's about specifically about feminism and neoliberalistic feminism, which I did not really know was a thing, but I implore everybody to check it out. I think it's very relevant. It's to all of us, whether you're male, female, or anywhere in between, or transitioning, anything like that. I think it's quite remarkable, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So please check that out. Should be available for everybody tomorrow.
All right.
All right. And with that being said, bye, guys. And we'll have another live chat for you guys on Tuesday next week.
Bye, everybody.